So what we have here is this is an Access desktop database, and we may want, this is the kind of database that people are currently using that you may want to move to the web. And so some of the things that you can do with this, again, right now these are all local tables, but if we moved this into an Access web app, basically, kind of upsizing it, almost kind of like upsizing it to SharePoint, what that does is it basically takes these tables and moves them to a SQL background. So it's in a SQL Azure tables out in the cloud that you can access from here. So the cool thing is that once that happens and you reconnect these through ODBC, basically these become SharePoint lists, basically, because they're in SQL Azure. You can actually take this Access database onto your laptop, and it doesn't matter if you're working from within your organization or you're on the road. As long as you have that Access database on your laptop, you can access the same data in the cloud, whether you're here or you're out of the country or whatever, because those tables then. So with the data then in the cloud, you can still use your current Access database, your desktop database, but you're connecting to those tables out in the cloud. And so one of the things that we've done recently is we created an Access Days Cruise app. If you're familiar, there's an Access Days conference that's coming up in January of next year, and just for kicks, I'll pull that up real quick so you can kind of see what's going on with it. What's going on with that? So this is the Access Days Caribbean Cruise that we're putting on in January of next year. We actually have a deadline of May 10th to sign up for it. But this is the kind of we wanted to be able to provide some of the information that's within this to people that are using a mobile device or they're using an Access web app to look at that information. So what we ended up doing is we took the sponsors and the speakers and the frequently asked questions, and we built that into an Access web app, and then above and beyond that, we took that and we we created an Android app and a Windows Phone app, and soon to be released an iOS app that we can connect to the data of this Access web app backend. So that's kind of what we're doing with that. So switch back. And so if we want to, in here you see that these are local tables and you'll see queries and forms. And if we want to move this over to SharePoint, what we need to do is just go over and choose Move Data to SharePoint. And it will ask us, where do we want to move this SharePoint site, basically? What SharePoint site do we want to use? So I'm going to choose this one. It's where we put the cruise information. But I'm going to go ahead and choose Next. And then what it will do is it will connect to that database in the cloud, and it will move the data side over to basically SharePoint lists, which again are in SQL Azure. So hopefully this will log in fine. I've had a couple cases when I've done this where one of the issues that I run into is I use different logins for different things. So sometimes I'll be logged in on our customer's SharePoint site. Sometimes I'm logged in to the Waterfall Count site. And if I'm not logged in as the right person, I don't have the rights to store the tables out there the right way. So it can be a little bit of a concern. But this is just kind of a quick and easy way to get it kind of moved out there. So I'm gonna while this is going, does anybody have any questions that they want to post into the chat window? And so question popped up, is this creating an Azure SQL Server database? Yeah, so right, I'm using an Office 365 connection, so this is creating a SQL Azure database through SharePoint. Does the VBA code transfer over into SharePoint? No, it does not. One of the when you're working with an Access web app, the web app itself, the desktop app uses VBA, but if you're SharePoint list is Azure. So in 2013. So when you create an Access web app can only utilize macros in order to perform its function. There's no VBA in an Access web app, so you're a little bit limited. Well, a lot limited with that functionality. You're kind of stuck with the macro system that they've given you, and they're going to keep expanding on the macro language, but it's very limited over what we can do with VBA. So what we have in this situation of the database that we're doing right now, we're moving the tables over to SharePoint as kind of a SharePoint list, which is really an Azure database. A list is kind of a table within SharePoint. It's a SQL Azure table. That's one of the changes they made. And so the data will be in SQL, but all of your forms, queries, VBA that you used before, you can still run with your local Access database. So you can just run your desktop app as, but you've got SQL in the cloud. So it's kind of a really cheap way to move into the SQL environment if you haven't done a lot of SQL stuff in the past, because it's automatically creating your SQL database for you. So some of the pluses about doing that is that you can with Access Desktop, you're limited to a 1 gig table size and a 2 gig database size. And so obviously with SQL, you can go way beyond that, so you can store any images that you want into your SQL database, because you don't have those kind of limitations. And yes, there are ways around that with local access databases, where if you have a 4 gig database, but you've got 700 meg in each of the 4 tables, you can split those out into separate databases if you really wanted to, and reattach those. And so you can do things like that. But this is just a kind of a quick and easy way of doing it. One thing I do want to point out, which is one of the things I liked about Access 2010 versus Access 2013 web apps, is that with Access 2010 web apps, they made the assumption that people are going to use both desktop apps and web apps. And so what would happen is, if you were in the browser environment, you would be using the web app side, but if you had a database like this, it stored all of the VBA forms and all of that into the SharePoint the web app, basically, so that if you connected to it from another desktop machine that had access, it would actually download all of the VBA portions and that kind of stuff. So it kind of housed it for you. Whereas in this case, if I wanted to take this database and give it to Joe or give it to Jack or Judy to utilize this, I would give them the front end, and that front end would connect to those SQL Azure tables in the cloud. And so now it's done. It says your tables have been successfully shared. I'm going to choose Finish. And what you'll see here now are these are the tables now stored in SharePoint. So we could now create a web app that's connected to this information. this is the, if any of you have heard like Kevin Bell speak recently, this is kind of what his direction has been with Access Web Apps. He doesn't do a lot with Access Web Apps itself, but what he utilizes is kind of this feature set where he's moving the data into the cloud with SQL Azure, but he's keeping everything for the most part as a as a standard Access desktop database. So if more than one people use it, you can give them the runtime version of Access and allow them to do it this way to have the full feature set of Access, and then it would, for if you want to give people some of the Access Web App functionality, then you could basically build the web forms on top of it. So yes, the relationships are intact with these, and let's take a look. I'm going to go into, see if we can go into Design View and see if it says yes here. So this should, it's got a lot of stuff going on, but the relationships of these tables are still out there, even though we've switched these over to that. Joe's asking, is there a cost associated with Access Runtime? No, you can give Access Runtime for free to anybody. Generally, what I'll do within an organization from the Access desktop side is the people that are utilizing Access for designing their own reports, or if they need to add fields to tables and those kind of things, most of the time I'll just say, okay, those people can buy Access, but people, we had a case today where we had a volunteer food pantry out in Detroit where mostly volunteers use the system, and it is an Access desktop database. And I'm like, on those computers, they don't need to have a full copy of Access, so you can give them a free copy of Runtime. From Charles, will the distributed front ends have a problem making the internet connection? I've not had a problem, but you do have to make sure that you have the right credentials for that. So yeah, I haven't done a lot of this kind of stuff, but I can see definitely from Kevin's side how this can be helpful, especially for people that they have an existing Access database. They want to make it accessible for other people. So it's kind of an easy way to get the data in the cloud, as well as making it SQL. Yeah, the credentials of creators. I believe that you still handle the rights of the tables through Sharepoint. I don't have experience with that, so if others do, maybe they can. Okay. All right, good. So that's kind of how that one works. I don't need to save the layout of relationships, but you get kind of a general idea. This, like I said, this is kind of a nice little way of taking your database and moving it to the cloud to allow people to have access to these tables, and so that's kind of how that one works. So that's one way of doing this. Another way, and the way that I've done a lot of my web apps, is that you can create a web app from scratch, either as a custom web app or by utilizing templates which are stored in the system. So there's a lot of templates that come with. So if I wanted to build a web app using a template, I could just choose one of these templates and choose what I want to call it. And hold on a second, I'm having to log into Office 365 on another screen. Okay, let's see if that does it. I'll try it this way. If this doesn't do it, we'll do it differently. Yeah, this is the one thing that I don't like about having multiple logins, because again, if you're not logged in as the right person when you go and do things, it can really be a mess here, because you're when you log into Access, you're logged in as a certain login, and so Access itself, if you're not logged in, you'll get some weird results. So good. So I'm in, and so what this Steve says he's working with Tom to build an agency database. That's cool. And I see, is Access Web App similar to splitting a database? Well, what we just did was we took an Access database and we split it from the front end to having SQL Azure tables as the back end. So that does split the database into two things. With a web app, in actuality, with a web app, if you design a web app like what we're doing here, it's stored in the same database, but in fact here we see that these are the tables, and again, this is a brand new web app database that I created from scratch that shows us these are the tables that were created, and you can see the little picture of a globe, meaning that it's a web app with a SQL Azure backend, and then it automatically created these forms for us. It creates these forms, data sheets, and list views for each of the different tables that we have. And hold tight, I'm gonna mute again just because I'm getting some feedback a little bit again, so I apologize for that. So again, so if you have questions, go ahead and jump in the chat window again. So in here, what we did is we created a web app database from scratch using a template using an Access Web App template to build our database. There's a lot of really good templates out there to check out, but I just want so this is really good for you to experiment with. So what it does is it builds the tables as well as the forms, which they call views, different views, and what you'll see is for each of the tables, you'll see that there are these sections in here. And then you've got a list data sheet, and then sometimes they'll have by group or by status or things like that. So if we were to modify any of this, we could click on edit, and this is kind of like editing a form. You know, you can grab fields and move them around. And we're not going to get into all this, but you can see with web apps, it actually, you can't have overlapping controls, so it makes room for those as you're working with them. So if you have, we can still move these over, and we can expand these, but if we were to make this tall, it's going to push the other ones down. So you can kind of see that. And so the nice thing about this is that it gives you, like I said, a strong template to work with. It automatically creates your table structure for you, automatically creates your forms, and if I want to now view this as in a web app, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to share this as soon as it pops up into my other screen. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Launch App. And I need to hold tight because it's going to flip over to my other screen again. And we should be back. Okay, and so this is what the web app looks like. Now you can see I'm in Chrome, and I've got in here, I've got my projects and employees and customers and tasks, and the way it looked here is very similar to the way it looked in Access. So you've got it's very minimalist. It creates your text fields for you. You've got it automatically builds your drop-down menus, for you if you've got information like that. So it's kind of a quick, down and dirty way of building a web app. So the reason why I want to kind of point this out is this is kind of the second way of doing it, where you can either use a template or use a blank site, web app, basically a blank web app where you add all your own blank tables, and you create it the way you want to fit your specific needs. For instance, the client that I visited yesterday, like I said, they're a large chain of grocery stores, and with them, there's not really a template that could fit their specific purposes, because they're tracking things that are only in their world, in the grocery store world of things. So there's not really a template that you can use to start from, but a lot of times you can just grab like the employees table and add that, or the customers or clients table and add that, and so it can build a lot of that portion for you. And again, the nice thing about this is that you can take, because of the way it's built, and again, I'm going to switch back over to Access again here. Hold on a second. Okay. So you should be able to see Access again. And so so within this, it it's kind of quick, down and dirty way of building something. And like I said, one of the cool things that we've done recently with this is that because we built a web app from scratch, we can now utilize that web app in other ways. And so one of the things that I've done is I've created a web app from scratch, and so that's the next way. Again, this way we used a template. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to build just a down and dirty web app from scratch, and then I'll show you kind of how we use that in just a second. So I'm just going to do this quickly, but I can do I can click on File, New. I can create a custom web app. I'm just going to call it another Andy, and go ahead and do a create, and I don't need to save that. And so now what it's going to do is it's going to build a basic blank web app, and the first thing that I need to do with this is to add tables, because it's a blank slate. There are no tables in it. There's no forms, queries. It's as though you're building you're designing a desktop database, but you're starting with a blank slate. So generally what I'll do in here is I'll try and start with one thing, if at all possible, like person or clients, or something that I can do to add, so to save me some time. But if not, we can just click on new table, or here you can click on add a new blank table. It will put you in the table, and I'll show you here. Just quickly, if I were doing this from scratch, I'm just going to do first name, last name. I'm not going to go crazy with this, but I'm going to take. I'm just going to take this, save it, TBL contacts, And what I want to show you is after it creates this table contacts, I'm going to close this, and what you'll see that it automatically builds a list view and a datasheet view. And so for people that, in a list view is kind of viewing one record at a time, it automatically creates a little area to find data, so it's kind of a list of the data to select from, a filter, and a data sheet is kind of like an Excel spreadsheet view. But it does those automatically for you, so you don't have to build those from scratch. And so by you doing this, you can kind of build some of the stuff that you need to. It'll handle, for the most part, 80% of what most people need, and then you just customize those views to fit your particular needs. One of the things that while I'm in here, and I know I've talked about this before, but just really quickly for new people, one of the things I really like about this interface is it seems like when I've been programming in Access since '94, so Jack and myself, there's a bunch of us on here that are old timers. No offense, Jack, but what we'll find is a lot of times we'll go on site to a client, and there are different levels of Access programmer that they've had, whether they have somebody internal that's developed an Access database, or they'll hire a programmer on the outside that's something, either they're new to Access but they're unemployed, so they call themselves consultants, or they're they've been in the field for a long time. Everybody has a little bit different way of adding those buttons to edit, to save, to cancel, to delete. Sometimes I'll find that like an exit door in the top right. Sometimes I'll find an exit door in the bottom right or bottom left. It's all over the place. Sometimes you'll see them on the right-hand side. And the nice thing that I like about web apps is, yes, it is a very minimalist, and a lot of people don't like that. It's very black, white, gray kind of views, looks. You can add some spot of color, but it's really designed for just basics. But it automatically creates this little option bar up here of add, delete, edit, save, and cancel. And it consistently puts that in the same place on every form, so there's consistency with every form that you create. So it's kind of a nice way of doing it. And so you can create a web app from scratch, and it's very easy for anybody to get into this, because they can. You don't have to have the training of the stuff that a lot of us have done with VB.NET to build your web apps from scratch. You can just build it quickly. You can save it, and then we can go back to home. We're going to launch the app, and I need to switch my. Hold on back. I need to go back to monitor 3 again. And so here's the quick view of that. And I mean, yes, this is very minimalist, but we did it very, very quick. And so anybody within an organization can build simple databases like this very, very quickly. So it's nice to keep track of inventory. It really makes web apps accessible to a lot more people, and you can make it easily accessible by many people just by giving them rights or inviting them to this. And so I want to show you one of the things that I've done is that I've created. And hold tight. I'm going to jump into Access for a second. I'm going to pull this up in Access, and then I'll put it over there. Put it over to the web. So hold tight. So what I did is this is what I call the Access Days Caribbean app that I created. And so what I did is I created a blank web app that has table categories, and the categories are things like agenda, attendees, frequently asked questions, highlights. So these are the the different, like for instance, I can click on speakers, and I can see who the speakers are going to be at the event. I can choose sponsors and see who's sponsoring the event. And so I've got a web app here that has that information. I've got topics, which are really the detail. So here I've got frequently asked questions. I've got a section that people can actually edit. And then as we go down, you'll see that we have the ability to add thumbnails. So you can see my lovely face here and Armin and some several of us who will be at POG. You'll see us there. Actually, I know all of these will be here. I'm not sure if Tim will be there, but I know all of these speakers will be at POG next month. And then we've got different sponsors, so you can see our logos and things like that. So you can easily add pictures and do things like that. So I've got categories, topics, register, and table events here. And so what I did with this is I created the web app, and then I opened it up for we had Alpha software. If you've heard about Alpha Anywhere, Alpha Anywhere is a software application made by Alpha Software that allows you to. It's a rapid application development for Android, iPhone, Windows Phone apps. Although rapid application in the Alpha world versus rapid application in the Access world are totally different things. What I found is that it may take 15 to 20 times longer to build something in Alpha, but it's still it's faster than building a native Android app and a native iOS app and a native Windows Phone app. You can build them all one time and then publish it. And so what we've done is I built this first, and then I gave Alpha the connection to these tables. And so what they've done is I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Play here, and if I type in Access Days 2016, you'll see that here's the Access Days app, and so now you can install this Access Days app on your Android device or on your iPhone. Actually, I'm not sure if the iPhone is out, but Windows Phone and Android are out. So if you have a Windows Phone, or if you go on Android and you search for Access Days 2016, you can find this app and install it. And I was hoping I've got a Nokia a Windows Phone. I just switched over to Windows Phone from Android about 3 weeks ago. I actually really like it. It doesn't have all the apps that I want, but it's I still like it. I like the interface. And I wanted to be able to show this on this. I'm pointing to my phone. I wanted to be able to show you that on the screen, but I can't do that today. But if you want to download Access Days 2016 onto your app onto your phone, then you can see that how that information is connected to Access Days. Hold on a second. How it's connected to this data. So what you'll see when you open up the app is that you'll see the different categories that you can choose from, and so you can view the categories. And I'm going to refresh this real quick. So you can view the categories, kind of like what you do here. You can choose the attendees and frequently asked questions and different things like this. And you can view all that on your mobile phone. And one of the cool things that we're going to be introducing in the next couple weeks is that when you add information to this web app, it will automatically appear on your phone. When you add, hold on a second. Yep. Okay. I was just checking the chat real quick. So you can view this information on your phone. So you'll actually be able to add a question on your phone, and then you can jump into this web app. I'll give access to this, and then people can view it in the web app. You can add data to the web app and then jump on your phone. You'll see the data show up on your phone. So you'll be able to see how you can quickly view that data, whether you're in a web app or you're in an Android device or an iOS device, or if you have a local access database that you can connect to it. So it's these are the kind of opportunities that I see that people are gonna do more and more of. Because it just gives you an easy way to take a database for people like me that I have no experience in developing any kind of web app before Access. It was just I didn't want to learn JavaScript. I didn't want to learn HTML5. I didn't want to do all those kind of stuff. And this gives me the ability to build an app quickly that works in a web browser that gives people access to it from different devices. And the other kind of cool thing about it is that in my experience, when I've worked with some IT people, especially people that they're in the Oracle world or in the SQL, and I spoke at like 8 SQL Saturdays last year, and one of the issues that I kind of run up against is I would be sitting at a table and they didn't know I was an Access guy, that I've been doing Access for 20 odd years, and somebody would bring up Access, and the people at the table would laugh because they think that Access is I envision they think of Access how it was back in Access 2000 or Access 2003 or earlier, and they're thinking about the limited capabilities that Access had at that time, and they're not looking at the capabilities of, hey, look, this Access Dates Caribbean, this is a SQL database with a web app front end. I don't know of any other software package out there that I can build this kind of, yes, it's fairly simplistic, but I don't know of any other way that I could build this quickly in a matter of minutes. I mean, come on, think about it. We created 3 different databases in less than an hour, and we could have done it in less than 15 minutes if I didn't wasn't such a loudmouth here. But anybody can do this. And IT can control the security of it. So you don't have to worry about, one of my clients is Post Foods, and they have more than 70 Access databases on their servers. And to me, it was an IT logistical nightmare for them to keep track of all of these different Access databases. To me, it's like herding cats. How do you keep track of all these different databases? And those were only the ones on the server, not to mention ones that were on people's hard drives that we didn't know about. And so there's, with something like this, because this is an Access web app, but where is it? If I click on back to site, I'm in a SharePoint. I'm in a SharePoint site. This is an Office 365 SharePoint area, and this is something that IT would have control over the rights to grant grant people rights to edit the database, or you can give rights to develop the database or whatever you want to with it. So you're giving the control back into the hands of IT people. And I think that that's one of the pluses. So on the downside, when let me go back to the web app again. This is, it's a fairly simplistic design. This the macros are so good. Yeah, good comments in the chat window. So there's a lot of capabilities here that people can quickly utilize. Where else can you create a SQL database this quickly that has this kind of security and allows people to handle the rights on? It's a very powerful tool, but you can't look at Access Web Apps as a replacement for VBA, because when I built my Waterfall Calc app, the Waterfall Calc app can do a lot of stuff, but it took months of creation, because instead of being able to write VBA, I had to write, everything is done in the macro language. And so here, I'm going to jump back over to Access just for one quick second again. Share Access. So I'm back in Access. So in here, if I click on Advanced, you see I can create a query. I can create a blank view, list view, datasheet view, which are all forms. Or I've got these macros. Macro, which is a standard macro that we're all used to, a data macro is kind of like a replacement of a dim RS's record set and looping through record sets. Think of macro like that, where you're looping through record sets to find a record, or you're looping through it to edit data within tables. And you get your onStart macro is kind of like an auto-exec macro. But there's no VBA here. You can't write any VBA. So for a lot of people, a lot of programmers that I've talked to, they're like, okay, this is a great tool to begin with and a great intro to web apps, but there are limitations. And so I just kind of want to point those things out, because this is a powerful tool. I love the idea of taking all, if a company has Access databases and they want to move them to the cloud so that people can share that data, that this is a great way of being able to move to SQL and be able to move that data to the cloud so that they have access to that in other software, ODBC and connections and things like that. But it can't do everything. So even though some applications are great for this, don't think that this can do everything, because it can't. The other thing I don't like about Access Web Apps is when I'm viewing, if I'm viewing this in a in a browser on my phone, one of the things I don't like is you've got this gray area here, and I apologize. I'm going to switch back over to I'm going to switch back over to my web browser again. But this gray area where you see table categories, topics, register, events, this is a couple inches, and you cannot hide this. And so that's already taking up that much space on your mobile device. And so it leaves a lot to be desired from the mobile phone world, and that's why I personally recommend Alpha Anywhere for being able to do your iPhone, Android Windows Phone apps and do it in there now, at least until we have a good solution from Microsoft for doing these kind of simple apps in the mobile world. So that's all I have to say about that. So what I want to do, I'd like to open this up for questions. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask in the chat window, and I will I'll also open up the mics here. So if anybody has any questions that you want to ask, please do so. How difficult is it to learn Alpha? That's a good question. I have not learned Alpha, but from the videos I've seen, and I'm trying to think. Hold on tight. I had a presentation by Dion at one point, and I'm trying to think if I I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so okay, but let me see here. There was a presentation that we had by Dion from Alpha, and I know it was recorded somewhere, but I don't see it right here. But if you take a look at Alpha Anywhere's website, there are some videos on how to do it. It's relatively easy to get started. They do have a bunch of plugins that you can add, but to really customize it, you really need to know JavaScript and HTML5. But I have not gotten into it. I'd like to get into it, but I'm just so busy with regular Access and that stuff that I haven't had a chance to get into it yet. But if for those of you that are attending the POG presentation, I know Dion McCormick from Alpha Software is going to be there, and he's going to show how people have done that. And I'd encourage you to take a look at the Access Days Caribbean app that you can download, like I said, from Google Play or from Windows Phone. It should be on iPhone soon in the next couple days. It takes them a little bit longer to approve apps to show up in the store, so it may be a little bit longer for that to happen. So Tom asked a question, going back to first demo with SharePoint tables, how does this compare to ODBC connection to SQL Server or Azure in a data center? So it's almost identical to, I mean, it is a SQL Azure, but the difference is that you're instead of putting it on a local SharePoint server at the company's location, you're housing it within Office 365 in the cloud. So what that means is Microsoft's responsible for all the backups. It's redundant in multiple areas, and I had the opportunity. About 2 weeks ago, I went to a Microsoft MVP conference, and I really enjoyed that out in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that they talked about was that when you create a SQL Azure database, they actually, wherever it is in the U.S., it's in the opposite part of the U.S. For redundancy. So if you create something in Seattle, Washington, there's a data center like let's say in Florida, in the opposite part of the country. So even if there were some wide, blackouts or something, anything like that, you'd still be able to access your information. So that's what that's for. Is it possible to create Access reports from an Access web app from your mobile device? We gave a presentation on that because if within your Access database, there are no reports. And I'm going to move back over to Access for a second. And so in Access, under this, you see we have tables and forms, and we have queries and macros, but there are no reports because when you view a report in a web browser, it's more like you're looking at our view, and if you print that web browser, you've got all the junk within the browser that also prints along with it. And so one of the things that we did in our, and I demonstrated it in one of the other months of the Access Web Apps group that we have, the webinars, I gave a presentation on what we've done with the Waterfall Calc app, where we have a button sitting on a form, and all it does is it says, email me this report, and when the user clicks that button, it stores into a table that the user has requested a report, and then we have a desktop database sitting on my client's LAN, and all it's doing is it's an Access desktop database, and it's just got 3 or 4 reports in it, and it pulls seeking for anybody that says, oh, they request a report, and every 10 seconds it will pull that, and if somebody had requested it, it automatically builds a report as a PDF, attaches it to an email, and sends it through SMTP over to the client. The banks don't actually know that it's not coming from the web app. All they care is that it's showing up in their email. But that's one way that we got around that situation. Good questions. Good, yeah, no problem. So any other questions that people have? It's about 8:18, so we got about 10 or 12 minutes left. Well, if you don't have any questions, one of the things that I want to kind of throw out there are, in the past we've talked about creating web apps from scratch. We've talked about, I gave people a tour of the Waterfall Calc app and showed how I built that and some of the limitations that I ran into with macros and things like that. But what other kinds of topics would you be interested in hearing about with Access Web Apps? We talked a little bit about hybrid apps before, and in the future, I've asked Judy and Kevin Bell to be guest speakers in the future because they've been working with web apps as well, and they can kind of talk about some of the I know for Judy, she's going to be talking about how she's built web apps and some of her strategies and some of the issues that she's run into in the past, so that from her perspective, you can kind of get a feel into what other people have run into. Kevin Bell is he used to work at Microsoft on the Access team. He did a lot of testing of Access, and since he's been on his own, he left Microsoft, I think, back in October-November timeframe, and so he's been doing. He's been working on some different web apps on his own, and so I've asked him to talk about. There's different ways to package an app, and packaging just means basically creating a .app file, which is actually an XML file, but you can or a zip. I think it's a zip file that contains XML files. But basically, it's a way for you to take an app, package it, and then you can upload that app to SharePoint. So there's a deployment, a way to deploy things. There's a way to update apps, things like that. And so sometime this summer, maybe July or August, he'll present. Judy's presenting in June. But I'm very interested in finding out what other kinds of things that you'd like us to talk about. One of the things that I forgot to mention was I was going to talk about some of the newer features that were in web apps. And so just to kind of go over those, one of the recent features that they've added is the ability to download data from the datasheet view into Excel. Before, it was kind of a pain to get the data for end users to get that data into Excel. But what I'll show you is, let me jump back over to my third monitor here. And so if you can see the browser here, what we have is we've got the list view and the datasheet view. And in the datasheet view, there's a button here that was, I think it's been maybe 6 months now. But what this allows you to do is you just click on this button and it downloads the data to an Excel file. And so you can pull that data in Excel. And hold on tight, because now I need to switch you over to my second monitor. That's the one issue of having all this. So in here you can see now this is Excel, and it's kind of pretty. It's one of the things I like is it's got a drop down automatically, but it's got the auto filter on, so you can select what you want to. But it's just a pretty Excel file that you can get from that. One of the other things that they did is they've increased the size of the macros. Before, the macros were limited to, I don't remember how many characters it was, but I mean 10,000 characters or something like that. But in our case, with the waterfall calc system, we ran into a lot of issues with that, and so in our case we had to write 15 macros, one right after another, because we kept hitting the limitation of the macro size. And so that was one of the things that we ran into, and they've since fixed that problem. And then the other thing is that they've added the ability to email other people within the same domain from within the web app. And I'm not really thrilled about that feature, because with the with apps that I've worked with clients, a lot of times they want to email their clients from within the web app, not just people within their same company, but it's one step in that direction, and that's a relatively new feature as well. If you go to the Office blog, you'll see some, as they announce new features, they're constantly adding those features to let's see if we can jump into it. Whenever they announce a new feature, they do it on the Office blog, and so if you go to blogs.office.com/access, just blogs.office.com/access, you'll see different postings there from different people on the Office team, or you know, there's Access team, Office team, and Jeff Conrad, who's also an author. He posts things quite a bit there too as well. Okay, so some comments. I'd like to see some real samples on using some of the macros. Okay, good. Yeah, we could definitely talk about macros again. Is the transfer spreadsheet macro available in the Access web app? Well, you don't need we were in the Access web app, and we did that little download icon is available in every datasheet view unless you want to turn it off. But that download to spreadsheet is available in every datasheet view in every if in any Access web app that you create, so it's automatically there. How about synchronizing web apps database with a desktop database? That's kind of an interesting idea. A lot of times when people are using a desktop database, it's automatically connected to a web apps database. But I've run into cases which is perfect for this, where people want to take their data with them. Like when we're in Portland, we have very little internet. The internet connection is, fair to partly cloudy. It's mostly cloudy. And so, having that data with you is a huge plus. So that's something that we could definitely talk about, is basically when you're connected via Wi-Fi or something, or on a LAN, you download the data locally and then do basically a synchronizing of that data. That's one of the cool things that Alpha Software has built into it automatically, is that if you are connected to a SQL database, you can have a snapshot of that data on your phone that you take with you, and you can actually enter and edit data on your phone. And then when you're back to having a signal, or back to having on Wi-Fi, it'll automatically synchronize the data that you put on your mobile device back to your SQL database. Your SQL is your database. So that's kind of cool. No, there's currently no way to upload or download files of any kind. Yeah, I think Tom, you are right. Okay, good. So yeah, so Tom's mentioning that there's no way to upload or download files through an Access web app. But again, if and I think that's one of the reasons why they did what they did with. Hold on, let me jump back over to my web browser here. I think that's one of the reasons that they did this this button for downloading to Excel, is because especially I met with another client that I met with. They're like, well, our executive team loves Excel. All they use are Excel. They've never used Access. They always are constantly just asking for data in Excel, and so having this little download where they can view the data in a web app and then hit download the data for them to play around with it in Excel, it gives them the capability of doing that. So great, good comments. Good comments. Well, good. Well, I appreciate everyone's input. Your suggestions, I'll definitely take those to heart and see about putting those on some future sessions. And I think that one of the things we could do is actually there's some of these that we could actually combine into, instead of having one long session like we did today on one particular topic, is we may grab like 4 or 5 of these questions and just spend 10 minutes on each one to kind of do that as well. So can you link tables in another database to a web app? In other words, the web app has link tables, and I don't know of any way that you can do that. I believe that you really want to build the it first, and then and then connect it that way. But I don't know of any way to do it the other way. So yeah, great. Well, very good. Yeah, I appreciate you guys attending as well. And I'll go ahead and turn off the recording here, and I'll make this recording available. It should be available within the next couple days to to our site again. And again, if anybody has any questions and they need to get a hold of me, feel free to, if you jump onto the Access Web App site, and you can you can fill, there's a form there I believe that will send to me, or you can email me. My email address is andy@worksmartdb.com. Andy@worksmartdb.com. DB like database. And that's it. I appreciate everyone, and have a good night. Thanks again.